Dennis was unable to manage Prost and Senna. But I'm sure Zach's learned from that, and he's got a master plan, and he knew all along what he's going to be doing and how he's going to be doing it, and which driver he's going to be favouring or not favouring, and how he's going to be controlling it. He's keeping his cards very close to his chest at the moment, but I'm sure he's going to reveal them in some amazing way very soon, and we're going to see, wow, is Oscar Piastri the greatest number two driver for Red Bull that Max Verstappen's ever had? In other words, is he taking lots of points from Lando Norris that's going to enable Max to go and win the World Championship? He's starting to make silly mistakes like jump starts and nearly hitting a white line on exit and doing other silly things. All these things are all to do with lack of concentration because he's not focused on Lando Norris doing what he does really well, which is just drive the race car with gut feel. Max has said what he said. Let it go. Get on with it. And if you want to have a discussion about the incident, talk about it amongst yourselves. Don't ask the drivers about it because you know what they're going to say. We've already heard it. Use your brains and do your own thing. Make your own judgment. My judgment is that.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, the goatiest of F1 journos to have ever F1, the legend, the man, the myth, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm good, mate. Very good. Justin Thomas won the Heritage yesterday, so I'm on top of the world, really. Great result for him.
Oh, all this golfing talk that I don't understand, Peter.
That was just to throw a spanner in the works. No, obviously good. I think the right guy won ultimately at the end of the day. I think the McLaren was a better race car. I had my doubts always after Max's pole whether he'd actually be able to win the race there. And always, with that pole being so near the first corner, as I said in the video yesterday, if you win the pole, it's almost, you've very, very lucky if you can come out of turn one in Saudi Arabia in the lead. And I think the same applies to Brazil to some extent and Austin and probably some other circuits as well we could think of. I really do think it's time that we address that issue and we allowed the pole winner to choose what side of the grid he wants to start from. I mean, Ayrton started all that back at Suzuka and he was right. I mean, he wanted to be on the clean side of the grid, which is where you want to be at Suzuka. But, there are also circuits where you might want to be on the inside because it's so near to the first corner. And you've only got to make a half reasonable start on the inside at a place like Saudi Arabia, and you're going to be in commanding position going into turn one, and Oscar made a great start. So it was all over really from Max's point of view by the time they got to about third gear. But so I just think, I did speak to the FIA about this not so long ago. And the immediate reaction was, it'd be much too difficult to do that, to allow the pole guy to choose which side because they've got all the sensors set up on the grid for the pole being on the clean side. And I said, well, it's basically only one more place. Is it that difficult? And they said, well, no, not really. I suppose not. And that was it. That was it. It's always the way. When you push them a little bit further, they say, well, yeah, we could do that, but then nothing ever happens because it's it's hard work, I suppose, or whatever. I really think it'd be a great moment, actually. It's a bit like the toss of the coin for a match, tennis, golf, whatever. Not golf, tennis, cricket. When you're interviewing the pole winner, they say, right now, big moment. Which side of the grid are you going to go from? I think it'd be a great thing that they're missing. And I remember saying this about in the Eccleston era. I remember saying I think they're missing a trick in not enforcing that all the drivers go to the front of the grid when the national anthem is played for the country in which they're racing. And Bernie and everybody said, what a load of rubbish, who cares about all that, get on with it, they don't want to do that. And so it never happened. And then sure enough, suddenly somebody presumably was watching my channel and said, yeah, it's a great idea, we should do that. And now everybody takes it for granted. I hope somebody's listening now when it comes to choosing which side of the road the pole winner wants to start from, because I think it's a great thing and we're missing a trick there. We should definitely do that.
So go on then, Mr. Windsor. It seemed like Max Verstappen got an uncharacteristically bad start off the line, and some say it was launch RPM, some say it was reaction times. Do you think Max would have chosen, if we're hypothesising for a second, a world where Max on the pole could have chosen left or right side, do you think he would have switched? Because I imagine that the dirty side, I thought the dirty side was on Oscar's side.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I don't know. I mean, that's the great thing about it. I don't know. I mean, Max is the race driver. I'm not, and so it'd be very interesting to know what he would have done. And I'd like to have that conversation with him actually, because I'm not sure that it's a question of reaction time or grip off the line in this case. It's more that if you make just an average start from the inside, you're going to be in pretty good position going into turn one in Saudi Arabia. That's all. It minimizes the downsides, if you see what I mean. And it's a good place to be. What you don't want to be is on the outside with a guy sort of on your left, even if he's not 100% alongside you, wondering whether you're going to cut across him or whether you've got to go around the outside of him on the first corner and maybe run a bit wide. You don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be on the outside of a corner ever in turn one if you can get away with it. Obviously, if you're starting, where Alonso starts, you try the outside and you do all that stuff. But if you're at the front of the grid, you don't want to be on the outside there. The same goes for most circuits, to be honest. Maybe Austin, outside's not too bad, but I'd still rather be on the inside. I think most drivers would if they're on the pole, wouldn't they?
In inside line privilege there is such a thing in racing.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. You risk manage better by doing what Ayrton did.
I think it just gives. I think also it gives. I mean, the other thing you would think about is who is the other guy who's now second. Is it if it's Lando Norris? Maybe you wouldn't be thinking the same way than if it was Oscar Piastri. If you're Max Verstappen, or equally, if it's Charles Leclerc, you'd treat him a little bit differently than if it was Lewis Hamilton, probably these days. So, it also brings that into play as well. And when the pole winner decides which side he wants to go from, you say, well, why do you think that? That's a really good question to ask him. And he said, well, Lando there, Lando, I'm pretty sure. Or Oscar, I know he's going to be down the outside of me. And whatever, it'd be quite good fun. And I think it'd be a good thing to do, actually. The more I talk about it, the more I agree with myself.
I don't disagree, Mr. Windsor.
Nothing unusual there.
I mean, you're never a million miles off as far as all things.
Well, I can tell you this. What I can tell you is that the FIA told me it wouldn't be that difficult to do at all. They just need to be told to do it, and then they would do it, basically. It's just one extra space, isn't it? It's not a big deal.
I suspect at the FIA, though, Peter, they've got very many, probably bigger, brighter, hotter fires to be fighting at the minute than
well, it depends on your priorities, doesn't it? If I was FIA president now, I'd be in the Canary Islands at the start of the first WRC1 event on the Canary Islands. I'd be there for that. I don't think he will be, but it depends on your priorities, doesn't it?
Very good shout, Mr. Windsor. Go on then, Peter. Let me ask you about the talking point of the Grand Prix. Turn one incident between Oscar and Max. Who done it? 5 seconds was the penalty. Was that fair? Were they too harsh or too lenient?
Well, I think the interesting one, I'm not going to answer the question straight away. Well, I'm going to fudge it, because the interesting one is if Max had just given the position back as he'd accelerated out of 2 to Lando. That's the interesting one, isn't it? And then there's also another question here. Sorry, to Oscar, not to Lando. What am I thinking? Lando, where was he? No, to Oscar. But imagine if George Russell had got Oscar. And so what then does the leader do? If he wants to give the position back, what actually would he do then?
Oof.
You see, it's a difficult one. So I think, having committed the sin, I think Max did the right thing, which was to keep racing and hoping that he wouldn't get a penalty. Because I don't think the rules are very clear about actually giving back a position if the position you're giving back isn't actually the position that you were in before the incident started, if you see what I mean. So, there's that. Yeah, I think it was. I don't think there's any way Max should have tried to go around the outside of Oscar Piastri there. I think it was pretty clear he was going to run out of road, and I was surprised actually that he didn't come back in front. I thought he would just filter in behind Oscar. To be honest, I think that's what he should have done.
But was that the play though? Bearing in mind, Peter, that clean air is king, and there's such a durable competitive advantage in this ground effect era per Oscar Piastri of being in front and having no one in front of you, not having to.
Well, of course, you want to be in front, and that's why Max pushed it for as long as he could. He wanted to be there, and I think at the end of the day, the 5-second penalty was pretty lenient, and it was okay, wasn't it? It was what it was, as Michael Schumacher used to say, and everybody else has now copied. But I think, I don't know what would have happened had Max taken the lead at the start in a clean start and led the race for the first stint. Would he have won the Grand Prix? Probably, because he doesn't make mistakes. The Red Bull was much better on time management than we thought. It was a quick car all race, and Oscar would have tried hard, made the odd mistake, and I think Max would have won the race. But it all went away in that first corner, didn't it?
What do you make then, Peter, of Max's reaction? Because again, this is what's causing controversy on 24 hours after that. Max was he didn't want it whenever he was asked about it in the post-race scrum or the FIA drivers' press. He was, I don't want to talk about it. If I talk about it, I'm going to get in trouble. The FIA muzzle us, and we can't swear. I'm putting words in his mouth now, but we can't swear. And anytime we criticise the FIA, we bring them into moral harm. And that's something for which we can get fined. What do you make of this? Is Max right to be full stop, new paragraph, not saying anything? Or do we have an issue with the FIA and the extent to which they police our drivers in 25?
I think Max is absolutely right in his approach. I think the team were absolutely right. They subliminally said, don't talk about it anymore, Max, get on with the race. Because obviously from Max's point of view, he will always see that as an unjust decision. Obviously, he's a racing driver and he made the pass the way he tried to, and he got the lead. And, so of course he's never going to say, oh yeah, I made a big mistake there. Why would he? I mean, he's Max Verstappen any more than Oscar Piastri would admit that it was his fault. They're racing drivers. But I think Max was absolutely correct. When he crossed the line, he said, well, it was what it was. Let's take the positives from the race. We finished second. We got the pole. The car was much better on time management than we thought. Got a lot to build on. Great. Thanks very much, guys. Let's get on. And that's it. And I'm surprised that anybody then was, I don't know what's the word is, callous enough to then start asking him about it in some sort of scrum. You've heard what he's going to say. That's obviously going to be the situation. You don't want to irritate the FIA, knowing that they're quite difficult sometimes. You just want to stay quiet and calm it down. And he said what he said on the radio at the time. It was my corner. He would have driven into me if I hadn't have taken avoiding action. We know that. Why did anybody even bother asking him anything afterwards? Why not talk about something more interesting? It's just a classic example of the media getting it completely wrong again, in my opinion.
Is it not? If I try and defend them though for a second, Peter, play a bit of devil's advocate. That's the talking point of the race, right? If they give him a 5 second, then it's pretty much done for Max. If Max doesn't,
well, not
get
really. No, I mean it was pretty close. So they give him a
close.
10 second, I think it would have been, or an even worse stop go or something. There's lots of things they could have done. I think it was quite lenient. Bear in mind. Didn't Lawson get a 10 second or something for doing something going off track? I think later in the race.
Yeah,
so I think they did a good job, the stewards.
I'd agree. No, I'd agree.
I think they did a very good job, and it's only the media. Max has said what he said. Let it go. Get on with it. And if you want to have a discussion about the incident, talk about it amongst yourselves. Don't ask the drivers about it, because you know what they're going to say. We've already heard it. Use your brains and do your own thing. Make your own judgment. My judgment is that Max was at fault there, and I think he should have given the position back to Oscar straight away. That's my judgment. But I think he got away with it, and I'm not surprised that he did what he did. And 5 seconds wasn't too bad a penalty.
Fair play, Mr. Windsor. Very, very.
And I think this is the problem. What you're touching on here, Cameron, is actually one of the issues of Formula One in 2025. It is that if you're a Max Verstappen fan, you have to support him in every respect. No matter what he does, he's got to be in the right, and everybody's got to be in the wrong. And if he hates the FIA, then we've got to hate the FIA. If he loves the FIA, we've got to love the FIA. If he hates Oscar, we've got to hate her. It's just pathetic. It's all come from, dare I say it, social media, Netflix, the whole thing. It's just come from a complete lack of understanding and appreciation that Formula One's an incredibly complicated sport, run by, in the main, well-meaning people who try to do the best possible job. And there are always interpretations on everything that happens, unlike others, I guess, like some other sports, but not in a complicated, nuanced way that Formula One has. And the problem is we're just overwhelmed now with the number of people who actually don't dig deep into what Formula One is actually all about. They're just looking at a superficial result. Oh, Max got a penalty, he lost the race, and he lost by 2 seconds. Without the penalty, he would have gone, the FIA must be wrong. And it's childish.
You sound a lot like Mr. Verstappen in the post-race presser. He said, quote, "It has a lot to do with why he's not talking and why he doesn't want to expound on his answers." Quote, "It has a lot to do with social media in general and how the world is. I prefer not to talk a lot because sometimes your words can be twisted or people interpret it in a different way. It's honestly better not to say too much. So that's just what I'm trying to do. You can't share your opinion because
Yeah.
it's not
And he's
appreciated.
absolutely
Apparently.
right. I think sometimes he's being a bit kind there. I think all the time, isn't it? A, and B, of course, people will then take that as some sort of hidden reference to the FIA have done something terrible and he can't talk about it. And that, then again, it'll get misinterpreted and misquoted, even though he's trying to say, don't misquote me. It just goes on and on and on. It's like the layers of an onion, and there's no end to it. And the only thing you can do is follow your own beliefs and understanding of Formula One, relate Formula One to the history of the sport and all the precedents that have been set in the past, and what is logical anyway. And that's all you can do. And that's what Max does. And he quite clearly expressed himself and thought that he did the right thing as a racing driver into turn one. The team made it quite clear that it was a good idea not to talk about it anymore, which was the right thing to say. And Max immediately went with that. I was worried in a way that when he crossed the line, he was going to say, well, that race was, that got away from me. I should have won that race. But he didn't. He was unbelievably professional, Jackie Stewart-like. And that was very impressive. And you could say, that's a big, big thing for Max to be this mature now and to be this intelligent and not to be listening to all the chattering noise out there.
Very good shout, Mr. Windsor. Go on then. In under the umbrella heading of what Max Verstappen was able to accomplish at the race and in qualifying specifically, I was astounded at the dude's performance and that he was able to put down a lap record in what some say, most aficionados say, was ostensibly the third or fourth fastest quickest. There we go. Fourth quickest car at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. What did you make of qualifying, Peter, and how did he manage to get that done?
Well, I question whether it was the fourth quickest car. It was actually quite a good car by qualifying. And I think a lot of credit has got to go to Red Bull. And we've been saying, and a lot of other people, I guess, have been saying, Red Bull without Adrian Newey, they're completely lost. Max is going to go. He's going to take 100 million from Aston Martin or something like that. This is a very, very impressive weekend for Red Bull. Very impressive. Look where they started from Bahrain, if you like. And then they had that engine braking issue. They still had more issues with braking, turning in, lack of grip, lack of balance on Friday. And look at the car that they developed and produced by Saturday afternoon. So, and then it was a very good car in the race, very good on tyre management, even though he spent a lot of the race in dirty air, in traffic. So that's the first thing that needs to be said. And also Yuki Tsunoda got into the top 10 as well. I'm not decrying Yuki that much, but after a shunt to get into the top 10, impressive as well, I think. So that shows that the Red Bull probably was the second best car there. Not the fourth best. And then I think sector one, all short corners. That's where Max was all over Oscar. Short corners, Oscar using much more road going in, more load on the car, on acceleration, and that's accentuated through sector one. Very clear in qualifying and the race. Sector two, pretty even. I'd say the McLaren is slightly more forgiving over the curbs at high speed, and that's where Oscar could just make the odd mistake and get away with it, whereas Max had to be incredibly precise. And sector three, Max had the top speed advantage, and as I detailed in my video, turn 27, he was unbelievably good in the way he got the car straight before he was getting the power on, and the patience he showed mid-corner, how much slower he was than Oscar in minimum speed in turn 27, and how much quicker he was, 50 meters out of the corner. Incredible, because he was doing on acceleration with no lateral load in the car. And that to me was more of a reference of where we are, how good Max Verstappen is compared with, say, Oscar Piastri, who we know is quick. That was more of an example than sector one, which is just pure and simple Max short corners. This, turn 27 is not an easy corner in which to be a great short corner driver, if you get my drift, because it's a very wide entry and it's quite easy to go in and trail brake and all that stuff. But it's very, very difficult to get right in terms of the rotation point and when you should be accelerating and how you should be accelerating, and also initial braking as well. Oscar was braking beautifully into 27, coming out of the throttle before he was hitting the brakes, whereas Max was losing power while he was still on full throttle. That was the unbelievable thing about Max's lap, in my opinion, was how he was able to settle the car and get it ready for the braking he was going to have to give it with cornering load, without taking his foot off the throttle. And you can see it in the telemetry. He's taking 6-7 kilometers out of the car, yet he's still flat on the throttle. Just beautiful. And that is all the stuff I keep talking about. That is between the digits of digital telemetry. Just wonderful, immeasurable, unmeasurable. And so it was turn 27 that was, for me, the gem of his lap. And but the rest of it, as I say, sector one, short corners versus long corners. A good short corner driver is always going to beat a good long corner driver. End of story. Right. And that's what we saw in sector one. But there's no magic there now. I assume everybody knows that by now.
Yeah.
Although I still going to get people sitting and say, "What is Windsor on about with short corners? What is he on about?" Read the subtext, please, or go and do a day with Rob Wilson. One of the two.
Brilliant. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let's talk about Oscar versus Lando, because this felt like it's something of an inflection point on a couple of different counts. When Max Verstappen jumped out of the car and was celebrating in front of the camera his pole, an improbable pole position. He didn't see Oscar Piastri just out of line of sight, and Oscar was very keen, tapped Max Verstappen in his chest, very keen to get the handshake and say, "Well done, mate." Something very different to Lando Norris as far as his demeanour and his countenance. Do McLaren need to put the full weight of their force behind Oscar Piastri for the Drivers' Championship now?
Well, the first point about Oscar going, wanting to go up and congratulate Max, of course, Oscar was he would never show it or talk about it, but he was absolutely on the top of Mount Everest at that point, because Lando Norris had crashed and was P10. I mean, what a moment for Oscar Piastri that was. I mean, there was so many things that came into play there. One was Oscar hadn't crashed and he was P2, which was a great result. Another was, Lando obviously wanting to fight back from Bahrain. Now it's going to be a real problem for him. And so, Oscar would have felt great at that moment. And the fact that he was beaten to the pole would have irritated him, but nothing like the weight of feeling, great about his situation at McLaren. In answer to your question, I have absolutely no idea, because as I keep saying, if I was Zach Brown, I would never have hired Oscar Piastri in the first place. I would have said, I got my Lando Norris and I'm going to keep my Daniel Ricciardo and we're going to have a great race team and win the World Championship. So I can't answer the question. I'm looking forward very much to whatever Zach's master plan is for how he's going to manage these two drivers as the season progresses, because Lando's going to win races again, for sure, as is Oscar. And, Ron Dennis was unable to manage Prost and Senna. But I'm sure Zach's learnt from that, and he's got a master plan, and he knew all along what he's going to be doing and how he's going to be doing it and which driver he's going to be favouring or not favouring and how he's going to be controlling it. He's keeping his cards very close to his chest at the moment, but I'm sure he's going to reveal them in some amazing way very soon. And we're going to see, wow, this is not Alfred Neubauer. This is not Colin Chapman. This is not Ron Dennis. This is not Frank Williams. This is the greatest team principal of all time, because he has got massive control over these two drivers, and he's got an amazing master plan of how the World Championship's going to pan out. Waiting for it, Zach.
Oh, your move, Zach Brown, CEO of McLaren. No, the challenge accepted.
And by the way, Zach, I don't want to hear, we're just going to let them race. I don't want to hear that. Thank you very much, because I don't understand what that means.
Oh.
Or better still, a Christian Horner-esque, we're going to get them race, but they're not allowed to get too close or touch one another with wheel to wheel.
Yeah, because those two things are compatible. Right. You can reconcile those two things with each other.
Good luck with that. And so, so it goes on. As they keep saying, I mean, the big question is Oscar Piastri the greatest number two driver for Red Bull that Max Verstappen's ever had? In other words, is he taking lots of points from Lando Norris that's going to enable Max to go and win the World Championship? Or not? Or all of a sudden, are we forgetting about Lando? Are we thinking this is head-on Oscar Piastri versus Max Verstappen for the World Championship? I suspect it's the latter, to be honest, but I don't know. There's no way a guy like Lando Norris can win a race like Miami 2024 and not still be in the running for the World Championship in a car as good as the McLaren. And here we are coming up to, guess what, Miami. So, if Lando doesn't blitz it in Miami and blow Oscar away, then we know that he's in trouble.
Oof. Mr. Windsor, let me challenge constructively. Can we meaningfully argue that Oscar Piastri wasn't a good signing now, especially on the back of what we saw last weekend, making less mistakes now than Lando Norris, fixed for his multitudinous travails being a poor qualifying pace and poor tyre management in the off season. He's continuously improving. Surely we've got to, if gun to the head, surely you've got to say now in his third year that Oscar Piastri's uppermost ceiling might well be higher than Lando's, who's in his seventh year.
Well, it depends on why you signed him in the first place. I think Lando would be driving much better now if Oscar wasn't in the other car. If Daniel Ricciardo was in the other car still, I think Lando probably would have won Bahrain and probably Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So, and he certainly would have won Hungary last year, that's for sure. So, I just don't see, it's not a direct comparison, is it? You've got a team. You've got to look at where it's at. You've got a team, which is Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo. Now, if they signed Oscar Piastri instead of Daniel because Zach was thinking, I really like Lando. I like his family. I've supported them. They've supported me financially. The whole thing's been brilliant. Lando's delivered, but I just don't think he's that good. I just don't think he's capable of winning a world championship. I'm going to have to get somebody like Oscar Piastri in the other car. He's got to be my championship guy, but I hope Lando wins a few races along the way. If that's what he thought, then I suppose you could say it was the right choice. Assuming now that they say, right, finally, we're letting it all out. We think Oscar is the man. He's our world championship contender. Lando's just going to do all he can to help him win the championship now. But that isn't the case. And that isn't what they thought. I can tell you that. That is not what they thought. They just thought, Oscar Piastri might be available. Got to get him. Got to have two great drivers. It was like a greed thing. And it wasn't a thinking through thing of how do we get the best from Lando, bearing in mind we've got a guy who's really, really good.
Yeah.
It was just a greed thing. And it's a bit like Ron with Senna and Prost. He didn't need both those guys. And they cancelled one another out in the end. So, to me, it's not a question that can be answered with a straight answer because the whole thing the foundations were so wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
Of course, Oscar Piastri is super quick. And if you had the right opportunity to sign him, you would. But if you've got Lando, it's just like I keep saying, if you've got Charles Leclerc, you don't need Lewis Hamilton.
Oh.
You need Carlos Sainz. It's the perfect combination. And there are plenty of other examples. If you've got Lewis Hamilton, you don't need George Russell.
It's a
You've
good
got George Russell, you don't need Max Verstappen. So it goes on. And I'm surprised how many people don't understand that because it's so logical.
Yeah.
And it's so clear that, it's sad that people just still have this attitude. You've got to have the two fastest drivers you can get. And look what it's doing to Lando. As I predicted, from the minute they announced Oscar Piastri as the other driver, I predicted this would hurt Lando Norris as a driver. And it has, and it is.
Go on then, let's talk
He's
about
off the ball. He's looking at the other side of the garage. He's looking at Oscar's telemetry. He's questioning his own judgment. He's starting to make silly mistakes like jump starts and nearly hitting a white line on exit and doing other silly things. All these things are all to do with lack of concentration because he's not focused on Lando Norris doing what he does really well, which is just drive a race car with gut feel. He's got engineers flapping around comparing his data all the time to Oscar's. And none of this is good. None of this is good for Lando Norris. I've said that a million times. There's no point repeating it. But, that to me, it's so easy and logical to understand. But engineers won't get that because they have their job to do. And their job is all about telemetry and information and data and scientific approach to it all. And a race driver is a race driver. He's not a scientist. He can use scientific methodology periodically, but not even when he's under pressure on a lap, but not in terms of comparing constantly data from other drivers, including his teammate, especially his teammate.
Blimey, Peter. It's interesting. I'm fascinated by this Lando Norris circumstance because I agree with everything that you said. He's not in Hora Buena, is he? This isn't the best Lando Norris that we've seen.
Yeah,
I think
the reason he's not driving that well at the moment and making mistakes is purely because Oscar Piastri is putting pressure on him in the other side of the garage. It's the only reason. Nothing to do with Max or Ferrari or Mercedes, all to do with what's going on in the team with Oscar. That's all. And he couldn't have a worse teammate because the guy's super quick and he's incredibly laid back and quite monosyllabic in many ways. And that's the worst thing you can have, actually, because it's almost impossible to fight it.
It's interesting, Peter. Let me say, I listened to a podcast over the weekend, and somebody said of Lando that he worries about what he's worrying about. That he's thinking too much. He's too concerned with, as you said, outside influences, the press, the media, what he looks like, what people think about him, what people are saying about him, and ultimately pair that with Oscar Piastri, a resurgent Oscar Piastri, a young, hungry lion of a peddler in Oscar Piastri, and that all serves to undermine Lando's already very fragile confidence. I'm worried for Lando.
Yeah, I don't think Lando's worried about how he looks and what people think about him. What I do think is that social media is just an integral part of his life because he's grown up with it. And when he's in a social media mode, he adopts the persona of whoever that social media Lando Norris is. And it's not preening himself. It's that he's something else other than just a racing driver. That's why I keep saying he should get rid of social media for a while, because he needs to be just an earthy, gut feel racing driver. So it's not that he's in any way self-centered. I just think he's got that whole social media thing is an image that is out there that is a Lando Norris version. And he just needs to get rid of that because it's like a ghost that's constantly there. And beyond that, I've always said, not just for Lando, not just for Oscar, not for anybody, I've always said there's too much information for racing drivers now. And they get too focused down a path that an engineer takes them based on the engineer's perception, based on data of where they think the ultimate lap time or the ultimate race result is, without factoring in all the variables that come into play as a racing driver. And I hate to say it, but I know a few race engineers who are actually very, very quick racing drivers in their own right. But I know many who aren't very good drivers at all. And I know nothing about cryptocurrencies, and I wouldn't pretend to advise anybody on a cryptocurrency deal. And it's the same with race engineers. You can give them data, but you should never, ever, ever tell a racing driver how to race and drive because they don't know. And yet very often they do. And a good example of that, I thought, was Gabriele Bortoleto yesterday, who was absolutely appalling in traffic. I mean, what is going on with this guy? He's supposedly one of these, super quick rookies from Formula 2 coming in and presumably swamped with data. And you look at all the data and you basically do exactly what the engineers tells you should do with the car. And he's going pretty well, it seems, overall, pretty clean. But then you put him in a situation with Liam Lawson and Fernando Alonso, neither of whom ever take prisoners as racing drivers. And what was the guy doing? He looked like he was he looked like he should be going back to Formula 4 because he just didn't look right at all, did he? He looked completely out of his depth. And I wonder whether the race engineers take that into account when they're educating their young drivers. They don't. And what could he say at the end of the race? Oh, I didn't see him. Well, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. You should be seeing him, mate. That's not good enough. Anyway, I think, I don't know. I mean, for me, he's still a very, very quick racing driver with lovely inputs, very soft inputs, and very good feel, particularly medium and high speed corners. And he will win more Grand Prix. As I say, the big interesting point now is going to be when Zach Brown reveals his master plan of how he's going to manage these two guys. We're all waiting for it, Zach, with bated breath.
Gun to the head, Mr. Windsor. Who wins this championship? I need a name. Oscar, Max.
Well, I mean, the thing about Oscar, and this is the other point. I mean, you're saying that podcast, they're talking about Oscar basically just gets on with it and does his own thing. I mean, don't forget that Oscar is an Australian, and there is a history of a certain type of Australian athlete, stroke sportsman, who, when they're good, they're as good as anybody on the planet, if not better. And that's only typical of Australians. And it comes with being relatively monosyllabic, relatively introvert, but being exceptionally good at what they do with uncommon self-belief. And I've put a list here of Australians who I think tick that box, and in no particular order: Rod Laver, John Newcombe, Pat Rafter. See, I wouldn't put Leighton Hewitt in there because he was a bit of a crybaby, but those three, Laver, Newcombe, Rafter, they've all got a sort of Oscar Piastri type monosyllabic, don't worry, mate, it'll be okay. Peter Thompson was another very, very good Australian golfer. Kel Nagle also. Jack Brabham, I would put in that. People often used to say, "Oh, Jack, good racer engineer, good mechanic, racing driver, throws the car sideways, sprays everybody with stones." I tell you, Jack Brabham was unbelievably quick, and he didn't have to tell people about it, and he just got on with it. And he'd never reveal any of his secrets of how he drove. He just, "Oh yeah, mate, yeah, didn't yeah." Steve Waugh, another classic example. It's sort of, if you wanted a cricketing equivalent of Oscar Piastri, it's Steve Waugh for sure. And Don Bradman, I would put in there as well. He didn't exactly go out and talk about himself very much either. And I think that's an important point. They don't talk about themselves very much. I think Ron Clark, the long distance runner, was a similar one. And so it goes on. There are plenty more. Dawn Fraser, the Australian swimmer. Very, very low key. Yvonne Goolagong, Corley. So, and Oscar's of that ilk. That's why I say it's very difficult for Lando, because, he's a UK born and bred racing driver, come up the normal way, reads Autosport, does all the normal things. Oscar's a different sort of guy. He's a very, very difficult to beat, laconic Australian. The most difficult type of racing driver to beat, I think, because they're difficult to understand and work out. And that's the problem for Lando. That's the great thing for McLaren, of course, but that's the problem for Lando. So world champion, I would say Oscar Piastri.
Wow.
I mean, imagine if it comes down to the last race, Abu Dhabi, and he and Lando are 2 points apart and Max is out of it. Imagine then. Who would you put your money on out of those two?
Oscar, without a hesitation, Peter, Oscar Piastri every single day of the week, without compunction.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I'm not saying I think 4 days out of 7 I'd put it on Oscar. I'm not saying every day in my case. I still think Lando's got a hell of a lot to offer, but Oscar's, and see, the people under pressure. This is why Saudi Arabia was an interesting Grand Prix for me, because it was all about pressure in qualifying anyway. And it's about pressure because of the nature of the circuit as well. It's not a circuit where you think, oh, as at Suzuka, the S's were perfect, turn 7, 8, whatever, the Degners. What you're thinking of there is, I got through the S's without a slower car, nearly killing me. That's what it is. And the thing about Saudi Arabia, which I don't like about that circuit, is that even if there's a guy on a push lap coming up, there's no way you can put the car that is safe on certain parts of the circuit. And I think any circuit that's like that should be struck from the calendar, to be honest, because it's poorly designed. It's very, very dangerous in some parts. And that's not motor racing. It's not clever. It's not skill. It's just ridiculous. And the speed they're going through some of those S-bends and finding a slower car, whether he's on the inside or the outside, it's completely wrong. Anyway, I think it was all about pressure. And the thing about pressure is, do you let it into your bubble or not? Or do you remain completely within your capsule of operation? Max does always. It's completely natural for Max Verstappen to live within that capsule of what he does with the car, feeling the surface of the road. The faster he goes, the easier it is, it seems, from the outside. As I said in that piece I did on turn 27. And as I said after qualifying, I'd be willing to bet his pulse rate was under 100 when he was about to go out for his final Q3 lap. I think everybody else feels the pressure more. But if you're aware of social media and you're more aware of what's going on outside your bubble, as Lando is, because he's constantly trying to fight Oscar Piastri, then you're going to feel the pressure more, which is why he made the mistake. Oscar Piastri is pretty good at developing that capsule now in which he operates. Yeah, he makes a few mistakes, but that's just the way he drives. He long entries, wide entries to the corner, trying to brake as late as possible, get the power on as soon as possible. Inevitably, He's not going to get it right lap after lap, corner after corner. Whereas Max drives in a way that he's much more able to sort of cover a small error before it even manifests itself. And that adds to his confidence, of course. But I think both Oscar and Max very, very good under pressure. And that's why I say if you come to a championship finale and it's Oscar versus Lando, then Lando's going to be the guy feeling the pressure.
You know, Peter, I tweeted out one of my favourite books, The Meaning of a Sport by Simon Barnes. I tweeted out a passage on Lando's error. He says, quote, Federer lost a lot of points and he lost a lot of points that he should have won, but he lost very few of the points that he needed to win. That was the difference. And in the long term, it is the difference between the very good ones and the very great. And I think you've just spoken truth to that, Peter. I think Lando will need to filtrate out for the mistakes, the errors of the unforced variety, particularly in the big points. And I think we saw a big point in Saudi Arabia this race weekend past.
Well, it shows how far his brain is from being as focused as it should be, that he didn't take his hands off the wheel when he hit the wall. That is pretty basic stuff, isn't it? And he could be nursing a broken wrist at this point.
Danny Rick.
Luckily he's not, and I'm glad he's not. But whoa, that just shows that there's something not right there in a big way. It just shows, sadly, that I was 100% correct in everything I said. The millisecond they signed Oscar Piastri, it was downhill for Lando Norris. And I don't know how many other people were saying that at the time. I think most people were saying, "Oh, isn't this wonderful, the dream team," or whatever they were thinking. And so I think, wasn't it only a few months ago, everyone was saying Lando Norris is going to be world champion, easy champion this year, 2025. Yeah. The bookmakers' choice, all this rubbish. Favorite. Yeah, right. Nobody was presumably thinking correctly. So yeah, he's got a big problem with Oscar. It always has. The guy's super quick.
Just a tad. And I think you're quite kind to Lando there, Peter, the way you characterise his Saudi Arabian performance, the pit lane stuff, both on entry and exit, struggling to get around Lewis and not understanding that the DRS, you've got to whack. He was just like, what are we doing?
And that shunt he had in qualifying, he went in too deep with his wide entry, he's too quick, but then instead of just giving up the corner and just running over the curbs and keeping the car straight, he tried to fight it and live with it and stays on the power. Then he brakes and then he goes over the curb. Once he's on the curb, the car's sort of out of control and he's still trying to correct it with opposite lock, with power. And then he finally hits the brakes and goes off on the other side. Everything there came under the heading of a driver under pressure. I don't want to use the word panic but I think there was a bit of panic going on in the middle of that. There was nothing cool about the way Lando's shunt happened. And it was the manifest of that was not taking his hands off the wheel at the last minute.
Unbelievable. What is he doing, Peter? Not good and uncharacteristically bad.
Yeah, and also Zach Brown, please advise, because you're his man or he's your man, and you're the guy that decided to put Oscar alongside him. Presumably you've got your master plan. What's going on? What are you saying to Lando or not saying to Lando? I don't know. We need to know.
Peter, a lot was made by grizzled F1 vets about the demeanour of Lando walking back from the incident in qualifying. That he was seen walking back with Zach Brown, and the two of them were laughing and joking. F1 aficionados and grizzled F1 vets said of that circumstance that you wouldn't see Michael Schumacher walking back from an incident like that laughing, nor would you see a Max, nor would you see an Ayrton Senna. What do you make of that, Peter?
I think Zach had probably said to Lando, the TV cameras are on us, Lando. Let's laugh and look as if we're relaxed. Isn't it that? Zach's pretty savvy, isn't he? I can't imagine there was much to laugh about, really. The guys have got another all-nighter. Amazing, eh? All that hard work they're going to have to do. All those bits we're going to have to use up. They're going to eat into the budget cap as well. That's a laugh, isn't it? I don't think it was that. I think it was more, hang on, they're on the cameras on us. We better not look annoyed because that'll give more power to Max. We better look as if we're relaxed about this, Lando. Give him a smile. It was probably that. I don't know. Maybe it'll... I don't know. Maybe they were thinking, maybe Lando was thinking, Oscar's probably watching this. I better look as if I'm relaxed and laughing.
This is the old Shakespearean aspect, though. False seeming, right, Peter? Like there's be upset. This is potentially a gargantuan moment, potentially a championship losing moment, and we're laughing and joking and skipping as if everything's fun and roses and daisies. That doesn't speak to grizzled F1 vets that lived through Jim and Nigel and Ayrton Senna, because this is a serious. You don't play F1 because it's risky and lives have been lost and serious accidents, right? So
no, you don't. And I've given my recipe for how I think Lando should respond to all of this. Or should have responded last winter. So it's probably too late now. And so I'm not going to go over it again. But he needs to do something. That is for sure. Yeah. That is for sure.
Yeah. Agreed. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. As we round third base, super generous with your time as always. Can we talk about Charles Leclerc and Sir Lewis Hamilton? Because I don't know. As a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, my optimism light is fading more and more by the millisecond. I can't remember a race weekend, Peter, when I've seen, okay, qualifying whatever for Sir Lewis. Sometimes he's brilliant, sometimes not so good. Of late, not so good. But in the race, Peter, I get that he's dealing with stuff at an unstable rear, that he's acclimatising to a brand new circumstance at Scuderia Ferrari, that he's getting to know the team, getting to know the brand new Brembo brakes that he's not used to, engine braking again, something that he's not used to. But 30 seconds adrift of Charles Leclerc over the course of 50 laps, by my very noddy maths, Peter, that's 0.6 a lap. What is going? Make sense. Help me make sense of this, Peter, because I just.
Well, I think just go back to my videos of back end of last year when we were talking about this. Did I not say, oh, Charles will have him for sure, but Lewis will have his day. He'll win the odd race and he'll look quite good, but mostly he should be just out there enjoying the autumn of his career in the red overalls, eating some nice pasta and, driving some nice road cars and building up his business empire. Is that not what I said? And if everybody just relaxed and thought, yeah, well, that's what's going on, everything would be fine. You're only going to be disappointed if you thought Lewis was going to go to Ferrari and blow Charles Leclerc away. And I'm sorry to say, but if anybody thought that, then they haven't been watching it, paying attention in the last few years. And the other thing about this unstable rear, I mean, what are we saying? That Mercedes had an incredibly stable rear in the last 4 years? I mean, come on. Ferrari haven't had a stable rear for I don't know how long. So let's forget about all that chat. I don't know what he's on about there. What he's saying is, I don't drive the way I used to drive, where I was incredibly finessey with the front end. I now want to have a wider entry to the corners, and therefore I want to be able to put the power on nice and soon. And whenever I do that, the back end breaks away. That's what he's saying. What he's not saying is, so therefore I need to change my approach and I need to go back to being where I was in 2021 and using the front end of the car much more efficiently, as Charles is. I mean, the good news is that at least Lewis is admitting it and he's not creating mayhem. Think back to 2007 when Fernando Alonso joined McLaren alongside this rookie. And all of a sudden, in certain areas, this rookie was doing a better job than Fernando within a race or two, probably even from Melbourne onwards. Fernando's immediate reaction, knee-jerk reaction was, this can't be happening because Lewis is better than me in any way. It's got to be the team who are giving him special treatment or this and that, or there's something on my car that they're giving me that makes Lewis look better. That was his immediate reaction. And Sebastian Vettel, to some extent, had the same attitude when he went to Ferrari. I'm a 4 times world champion. Why aren't I dominating things? And it's this inability to believe that there's somebody out there that might actually do some things better than you that is the problem. And I've always said one of Lewis's greatest attributes is that he is self-critical, like Charles Leclerc. And I thought it was actually very telling that he was as explicit as he was about what he's finding to be a problem on the Ferrari. He's not blaming the team. He's not blaming things per se. He's saying, I'm not doing a good enough job. And that's refreshing for a guy who's won 7 world championships to hear. And it shows how clearly he is still thinking and how mature he is. And what a good guy he is, actually, to think that way. And it's interesting that you talk about the Brembo brakes, because actually it was the brakes that were the issue back in 2007. Fernando was convinced that the reason Lewis was better at under high-speed braking, particularly, which showed up in Montreal when he got the pole, was because the carbon industry brakes were stronger and better over a race, but nothing like as pedal sensitive as the Hitcos that Fernando had been using on the Renault. And he insisted at McLaren that they switch to Hitcos on his car, which they did, and therefore breaking their contract with carbon industry and the bonuses involved, which is a very difficult thing for engineers when you've got 2 different brake suppliers on both cars, on different cars. And they ran that rest of that year, 2007, with Hitcos on Fernando's car, which he liked, and of course, he really got used to them and got the best from it. And and Lewis continued on the carbon industry. Now we're in a similar situation where he's so used to the carbon industry brakes, he's gone to Brembo, which typically are a softer pedal feel than the carbon industry. Now, I think Lewis has been around long enough. I would have thought before this season, if somebody had said to me, "Do you think you'll have a problem getting used to the Brembos?" I would have said, "I think you'll love the Brembos because it's going to give him a lovely soft feel." But obviously, he feels that is part of the issue. But then again, I don't think he's braking the way he used to brake when he was at McLaren in 2007. I think he's braking much more in a straight line, and he's just looking for great retardation, and he's not squeezing the brakes in and out of the brake pedal as he used to with the carbon industry so well. So I think it's more complicated than just the supplier, so that's one thing. And secondly, I think, as for the rear, who's got a stable rear? I saw Oscar Piastri with the back end out of line once, I think, in qualifying or FP3 or some moment. Seen Lando with the back end out a little bit as well. I don't think anybody's got a stable rear at the moment.
No.
So I think he just needs to get on with it. But I don't think in the overall scheme of things, he's going about as well as I thought he would go. So I'm not really disappointed. The only thing that disappoints me slightly is that he doesn't look quite as cool in the Ferrari garage and, in the red and everything as I thought he would look. I don't know what it is. There's something looks slightly unnatural about it all that was never the case when he was at Mercedes or McLaren. He always looked absolutely part of the team there, but it's something about it. I don't know what it is. I just can't get used to it yet. I can't really enunciate what I feel about that. It just doesn't look quite as relaxed and enjoyable for him as I thought it would. I think it all started with that picture with the F40 outside, at Fiorano. When you choose an F40, when presumably you could have had a 330 P4 or a Dino 1966 Dino 1.6 or something like some really nice Ferrari or even a 250 GTO, and you choose an F40. I'm being slightly cynical here. I'm waiting for you to laugh at this one, Cameron. But you see my point. I mean, the F40, come on, let's face it, it's a bit of a boy racer's car, isn't it? It's not a real Ferrari, is it?
Really, Peter? What, the first Ferrari supercar, the thing that propelled them back to...
it was a ridiculous bread van of a thing. There was not a single line on that that was remotely as nice as a 250 GTO. Come on, there's nothing. It wasn't even as nice as a Daytona.
Aesthetics, you've got me.
Of course. What else would you be talking about? 330 P4 is still the nicest sports racing car ever built. That's the car he should have had there. A 330 P4.
No, you've won up to me on aesthetics, but what the F40 means for the brand that was Ferrari.
Oh, it means, it was when all the supercar thing began, mate. Yeah, dreadful. It's got a lot to answer for, isn't it? All those ridiculous supercars. It wasn't a proper car.
Propel them back to the top of the automotive. You don't think so?
No. F40 was not a proper car.
I love a bit.
You want a proper, relatively modern Ferrari. You go for a Magnum 328, something like that, something normal.
Oof, that's not a bad car either.
Yeah, well, exactly. F40. I mean, when did you last try and do a 3-point turn in an F40 in the middle of a crowded Kings Road in the wet? I mean, it's not a proper car. Come on.
It won't work. But I suppose that's its gift and its curse. Peter, let me say about Lewis very quickly. I just I watched the side-by-side of the Charles Leclerc Sir Lewis Hamilton qualifying lap, which again 0.5 between the two. And Sir Lewis, again, I will make an excuse for Sir Lewis, or a reason even, a justification, in that he doesn't have the confidence in the car. And Sir Lewis has always been a peddler that gets the best out of himself and optimises for his lap time. If he has that confidence, he becomes better than... Do you know what I mean? Better than his peak when he has that. But watching the onboard, he's not even... He's leaving a lot of lap time on track, Peter. No, I'm not talking about complicated things like combined entry and exit or V-line and I don't know, dexterity of feel on the brakes or the throttle. I'm talking about racing lines, Peter. Charles Leclerc was brilliant because of his commitment, and so too not leaving... There were millimetres between his tyre sidewalls and the barriers at Jeddah Corniche. There were metres in stark contrast between the wall and the tyre walls of Sir Lewis, which makes me think There's something else going on there, Peter, because
No,
he's not
it's
committed.
exactly what I've been saying. It's exactly what I've been saying. He was a short corner driver, just like Charles. And that's why I always said, even going back to 5 years ago, that the three best drivers in the world are Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Charles Leclerc. They're all brilliant short corner drivers. The problem is Lewis hasn't been driving with short corners for the last 3 years at Mercedes, and he's taken that lack of feel to Ferrari now. To my astonishment, I thought that at Ferrari he would immediately go back into the Lewis that we knew up to 2021 before the Mercedes got really bad. But he hasn't, and he's still driving the same way. And what you saw on that lap by lap comparison was Lewis trying to get the power on as soon as possible and looking at the wall and trying to get the slide almost to the point where he's touching the wall, but just to be perfect, and doing the same on entry as well, trying to get as close to the wall on entry, get as wide an approach as he possibly can. Whereas Charles is going for short corners, manipulating the car mid-corner at the rotation point. And by the time he's done the rotation perfectly, which he's doing most of the time because he's that good, like Max, he's already looking at the exact point, which is the size of a 50p coin, that he wants to hit on the exit. And it's quite a simple matter. He just drives the car straight to that coin. That's why you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, he's only 2 millimeters from the wall. But he's just driving it to 2 millimeters from the wall. It's not actually that difficult. All the hard work is in the middle of the corner. Whereas with Lewis, it's much more difficult now because he's got to judge the power that he's putting on against what he's doing with the front and rear axles, to the point where he's trying to hit the wall, but not quite. And it's a much more difficult thing. And that's why he's much more prone to error. And that's why, I hate to say it, at the age of 40, that's why he's leaving a little bit of margin, because he's thinking about it more. Yeah. Age 21, he wouldn't have been thinking about it. And he'd just do it. But he would never have done it that way anyway. I mean, and I don't think, if Lewis at 21 now watched the interview that he did, was it this weekend, when he was talking about the unstable rear, and I think 21-year-old Lewis watching that now would think, whoa, who is this bloke? Come on, get a life, get on with it. Go and drive the race car, mate. That's what Lewis 21 would think about that. And that's the difference. And he's thinking about it now. He's more mature, and he's very mature now. He's probably more intelligent in terms of his field of perception of everything that matters in racing. But he's thinking about it too much. Everything has a profit and loss to it. And that never enters your mind when you're young and hungry. It never enters Max's mind because he just does what needs to be done. Never enters Charles Leclerc's mind. He just does what needs to be done. And now that Charles has got the sniff of always having the edge of Lewis, forget it. Charles just gone now. He's in another planet, and he's getting better now, better and better.
Let's speak to that, Peter, because
But I think Cameron, I'm a Lewis fan as well. Always have been, and I think the way for Lewis fans to look at this year is to believe that there'll be more Grand Prix wins for him. Well, there will be a Grand Prix win, as I think from a sprint win, that he will have some good days and good races. The tyres will come in, everything will be right. And he'll have some good days. And in the meantime, just enjoy being at Ferrari. Just enjoy it. Relax. He's never going to beat Charles Leclerc, as I said last winter. Never. Over a championship. He can beat him over a race, for sure. There'll be some days when Charles doesn't get it right and Lewis does. That still will happen, in my opinion. But overall, no way. And I remember I said that to you last winter, and you said, Mr. Windsor or Peter Windsor, that was, you're really, upsetting a lot of Lewis fans there. And I said, well, I can't believe there are any Lewis fans out there that do think he's going to beat Charles. Who would have thought that? I can't imagine anybody would have thought that. If they have, again, they haven't been paying attention to how good Charles Leclerc is.
Agreed. Or Charles Leclerc's become... It feels like I said to you, Peter, I feel like Lewis would have had a much better chance against Charles if this were 2022 and not 2025.
No, I disagree. I think Charles always been this good. No. Just like saying that about Nigel Mansell. Nigel was as good in 1982 as he was in 1992. It's just that nobody saw him, watched him. He was in a bad car then. And it's the same, Charles is, obviously they get better with road dust, but as a technique driver, Charles the same guy he was in GP3.
Just
exactly the same.
Sans mistakes now, Peter, and that's the difficulty.
Give him a chance. He'll make some more mistakes.
Do you think so, Charles?
He went off twice at the same corner in consecutive days, didn't he? So Charles will still do that. Fridays for him are a bit boring, I think, and he always, has the odd moment. He's getting better in the last couple of races, but he's still quite capable of making the odd error. As I say, that's why Lewis will have his day. Be patient. Be patient. like Max in the middle of turn 27. Patient, patient. Don't rush to put the power on.
Everything
Patience.
in its
Not many
time.
people seem to have patience these days. It's one of the greatest attributes a racing driver can have.
Everything in its time, Peter.
I don't think Lando had much patience when he went in too quickly into that turn 4-5 section and realised that he'd overcooked it.
No, definitely. You understand though, Peter, why it's difficult for Sir Lewis Hamilton fans on the back of like he's
No,
a
I don't. I
seven-time
don't.
champion.
They should be just completely delighted that he's there with his F40 and his red overalls and his pasta and his, Enzo Ferrari pictures and enjoy it. The guy's 40 years old. He's at the back end of his career. He's won 7 world championships. What more do you want? Give him a break.
There
He didn't go there to win the world championship. He went there because it was a great opportunity to drive for Ferrari. Terrible mistake by Ferrari because they should have kept Carlos Sainz, in my opinion. But that was it. He wouldn't have got. I mean, here's a question, and it's a rhetorical question, obviously. But if Ferrari had said to Lewis, "Come and drive for us. We really want you. We really think you're capable of winning the world championship again, winning Grand Prix with us. We're not going to pay you any money, but we'll pay you big bonuses for every point you score and if you win the championship, but no retainer." Would he have gone? No, I can tell you that. I'm not trying to say he only drives for the money. This is what I'm really trying to say. If he had gone under those circumstances, if he had said yes, do you think right now he'd be a different racing driver to the one you're seeing?
Oh wow, Mr. Windsor, we're getting very techie here. Of course,
Well, in my
would.
opinion, he would be.
Yeah.
And that therein lies the real issue. Lewis has got a great life. He drives for Ferrari. He probably checks his bank account on his iPhone, I don't know, 3 times a day. Excuse me if I'm wrong, Lewis, but I would if I were you. And he lives the Ferrari life. What's better than that? Enjoy, relax. And the more relaxed he gets, the more he enjoys his life, guess what? The better he'll drive. The more he thinks about it, the more he studies telemetry, the more he talks about understeer or unstable rears, the worse it'll get. A bit like Lando, get rid of the telemetry, get rid of this, get rid of that, stop thinking about it. I mean, the worst thing for Lewis actually is that there's such a ridiculously long championship. If this was like a normal world championship of 16 races, there'd be much more chance for Lewis between races to get himself together and to come back as as somebody that could get somewhere near Charles and to think about it a bit more. But when you've got all these races, bang, 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 it's just endless, one thing after another. And then the engineers are feeding you all this data and information, and you're trying to make head and tail of it and trying to do a better job next time out, and you do a better job, but then guess what? Charles gone half a second quicker again for no reason that you can put your finger on, and it gets out of control. And that's another thing. Let's have fewer races.
Peter,
let's have the pole winner deciding what side he wants to start from, and let's have fewer Grand Prix. Oh, but there'll be less money then. Not enough money to pay for everything. Good. Let's get some of the money out of the sport. There's too much money, too much attention, too many fans, too much worldwide, global appeal. Let's make the whole thing a bit smaller and more manageable.
Well, I'm sure that proposition will make Liberty Media shareholders.
Exactly.
Very happy, Peter.
I got the impression that Liberty Media seem to think that bigger is better. Can't be right. Surely not.
Let me see you that and raise you this, Peter. I get the impression that Liberty Media shareholders think bigger
shareholders.
is better.
You haven't explained to me yet. What's the difference between a shareholder and a stakeholder?
So a shareholder is a stakeholder, but to be a stakeholder, you don't necessarily need to be a shareholder. You can be a stakeholder. A stakeholder is just a related party, but a shareholder, those are the ones that ultimately pull the strings as far as the key strategic decisions, as far as the Liberty Media and.
You lost me about 4 paragraphs ago. But anyway, I kind of understand it, I think. But tell me this then: why in this thing of global appeal and all the rest of it? Why are they spelling Jim Clark's name with an E? And why was the word fourth on the podium in Bahrain spelt without a U?
There is to the second, Peter. I think if it's a North American slant, I think that's how they spell it. Is it not? F-O?
No. If you come back to me and said, no, this is a big thing where Formula One is penetrating Scotland and we're having a huge live screen event on the Firth of Forth Bridge, I would kind of understand it. Because that's how Forth is spelt in Scotland. The Firth of Forth is F-O-R-T-H. Forth in America is definitely F-O-U-R-T-H.
I thought it meant, yeah, it's not good enough, Peter.
Colour, colour.
No,
Don't confuse it with colour. You can take the U out of
yeah,
colour,
yeah,
but not
100%.
out of
That's not.
fourth.
I didn't realise
And
it's
fourth.
bad, Peter. It's
Well,
attention to
more
detail.
importantly, Jim Clark with an E. Tell me about that.
That's outrageous, Peter. That really
Well,
enrages me that they disrespect the legacy of the great Est one in Jim.
it's not a difficult word to spell
No.
correctly, is it?
No, I don't think it is. But again, they've probably got some.
Afi Barnrat, the Thai golfer, that's quite difficult to spell, but not Clark, surely.
Unbelievable, Peter. I have no explain for that, but it's unacceptable. I think they're concentrating on things that aren't important, just like Lando, worrying about things that they're worried about and failing to see the F1 wood for the F1 trees. And it's concerning, Peter, that like I don't say this disingenuously, not with tongue in cheek at all. I think that Liberty Media and the FIA need to focus on some of the important things, because they've got a multitudinous of fires that they need to be fighting. But the likes of Mohammed Ben Sulayem and some of the hires at Maloney, potentially at Liberty Media, seem focused on other things that they probably shouldn't be so concerned with. But it's just my take, my 2 pence.
Well, yeah, I take that as a broad point, but I mean, they must have a few editorial people there that can see that Jim Clark's misspelt or not.
They don't know,
or
Peter.
None.
No. That's lengthened. That's the reason why you know is because you're a proper F1 man, a thinking man's F1 man, and you were there.
Let's not go over the top now. No, but Jim Clark fan, but
100%. But you know, because you were there. You read, Peter, and you live for F1. If you've just parachuted in some work experience like a speckled nosed 16-year-old, how would you expect them to know how to spell Clark? They wouldn't even check it.
Yeah, but it's all about editors, though. I mean, and that's Ray Hutton, Matt Bishop. I work for some great editors, Nigel Roebuck, and editing is all about accuracy and trying to be accurate. So, what are we saying, that at journalism school these days they don't actually teach them the importance of accuracy? Maybe they're not. I don't know.
I think you might be onto something there, Mr. Windsor.
Well, it's not right. And I think that, and more than that, and it wasn't only the Clark thing, that was an interesting thing. They did a thing on the Constructors' Championship. This is 75 years of Formula One, obviously. They did a thing on the Constructors, and they listed the drivers that had contributed points to the Constructors' Championship each year, which is quite an interesting thing to do. And next to the driver that actually won the Drivers' Championship, they had a little trophy, which was also quite an interesting idea. And yet, when you look at it, it was completely flawed, because 74, they had McLaren with Emerson Fittipaldi and Denny Hulme winning the Constructors' Championship for McLaren, Emerson winning the Drivers' Championship. But then they also had Jochen Mass and David Hobbs, who didn't score any points at all that year in McLaren as two contributing drivers. And yet, on the other side of the coin, in 61, they had Phil Hill, Taffy Von Trips, Richie Ginther contributing to Ferrari's Constructors' World Championship, but not Giancarlo Baghetti, who won not only the 61 French Grand Prix, but it was also his first ever Grand Prix.
Oh.
First Grand Prix ever started, he won it. 61 French Grand Prix in a Ferrari. 9 significant points for Ferrari's Constructors' Championship, and he's not even mentioned. So it's not just Clark with an E, it's all this stuff. And it's worrying, because if we don't know what happened then, how can we make a decision about what is happening now or what might happen in the future? It's all part of one big picture. 100%. We all know that.
Yeah.
And if they're going to do history, but don't make it up.
Yeah. No, agreed. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. It's bad, Peter, and it's poor form. But again, I think this is the weird and wacky world that is Formula One in 2025. Not enough deference paid to those who came before. But I digress. On that bombshell, Mr. Windsor, you've been a legend as always. Far too generous with your times. I hope you enjoyed your Easter this weekend past.
Well, it was coloured by the whole Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, so I'm going to go and enjoy Easter now, I think.
Good man.
Quiet walk. Well, Dexter's going to take me for a quiet walk. A quiet but long walk now.
Good man. You're a legend, Mr. Windsor. Thank you so much for your time, as per usual. If you enjoy Mr. Windsor's market-leading purple sector-esque insights, go and subscribe to that dude's YouTube channel. Legendary. None better. No better storyteller. None better as far as engagement. And I mean, you hear the story, like, levels. Levels. Let's be honest. Go and subscribe to his YouTube channel now. Forthwith, please. And shortly thereafter, jump over to your podcasting platform, your favourite one, Short Corners Podcast, each and every single time, Purple Sectors. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, like, comment, subscribe and share. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, 5 stars and follow. Between now and next time, remember as always, to look but never stare.